Hey leader, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and we recorded this episode live from our Burgo Realty Studios. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll enjoy the podcast and become a subscriber. If you've been listening to us for a while and it's added value to your life, it would mean the world to me if you'd leave us a rating and review. That really does help us to grow our audience, so thank you in advance for that. Well, leader, in today's episode, you're going to hear my conversation with Christiana Smith Shi, who is an incredible leader. If you're unfamiliar with her, let me just tell you a little bit about her. She is the former president of Nike's Consumer Direct Division, where she led the company's global retail and e-commerce business. Before that, she was a senior partner at McKinsey Company, currently the head of Lovejoy Advisors, which is focused on digitally transforming consumer and retail businesses. She's a graduate of Stanford University and has an MBA from Harvard Business School, where she graduated as a Baker Scholar. She is incredibly intelligent. She is a phenomenal leader, and she drops so much wisdom in this episode. You're going to hear her talk about how being underestimated is actually an advantage, her advice for women in leadership, the greatest lesson she learned at McKinsey and Nike, and so much more. And so let's dive right in. Here's my conversation with Christiana Smith Shi. Christiana, welcome to the L3 Leadership Podcast. I'm really looking forward to this after interviewing you. And you have a brand new book out called Career Forward, Strategies for from Women Who've Made It. And I want to dive into the book, but I'd be foolish and remiss not to kind of give people a background on you. Can you kind of give us a high-level overview of your career history prior to writing this?
Sure. So I was definitely not the kid that you would have predicted to end up in the C-suite. I was the middle child of five, and I wasn't even the oldest girl or the oldest child. But I grew up in the Midwest and then California, and I always wanted to see the world and just had an aspiration to know what's out there and push myself and learn new things. And I think that's still the case. I mean, that's what led us to write a book, even after we're at a later stage in our careers. So I went to school in California, worked in financial services and investment banking for a while, went back to business school because I didn't like investment banking at all, and landed in management consulting with a firm called McKinsey Company, which is, one of the oldest, I'd say most prestigious firms in consulting, and was there for 24 years. So I was the first partner elected on a part-time program. I worked for almost 10 years. I worked 4 days a week only. And I was elected senior partner on a part-time program. And having paved that path and then being a partner after that for another 10 years, I was ready for a change. And one of my long-term clients was Nike Inc. My focus is retail, consumer, apparel, footwear, digital, all the fun things. And Nike heard that I was thinking about retiring from McKinsey, which you can do at a fairly young age, and asked what it would take to get me to come to Nike. And it didn't take much. It's a great company. It's a great brand. I admire Phil Knight, and I admire the people who've built Nike into what it is. So I moved over to Nike and was the COO and then ultimately the president of what Nike calls Consumer Direct today. And that basically means running all of Nike's retail and digital channels where they sell directly to consumers. So after doing that for a while, I retired for the second time. And now I sit on a number of boards, including UPS and Columbia Sportswear and Habitat for Humanity International. And I co-wrote a book with my good friend, Grace Puma.
And who is she, just so people have context for who you co-wrote the book with?
So Grace is the former chief operating officer of PepsiCo, and she's had a long and distinguished career in a number of, household name consumer companies, and has worked largely through the operations, procurement, supply chain arena, but ultimately running all of the operations for PepsiCo. Wow. And she and I sat on the same corporate board together for a while and became fast friends, which you don't typically expect when you're joining a board. But we did. And we ultimately kind of stacked hands and decided we were going to write a book together to give women a leg up, frankly, in their careers.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else for both of your resumes, leader, if you're listening to this, you should already have ordered the book. I'm already sold and bought in. Before I am curious, you've worked for some of the greatest companies on earth. McKinsey specifically, they attract the best and the brightest. All these companies, Nike too. What do you think it was about you or the way that you approached your career that enabled you to separate yourself and become a partner where so many others, I'm sure, were competing for very similar career paths?
I would say one of the key, differentiating aspects of me that people would have said was that I was a high performer. And I mention that because I'm not patting myself on the back, but I want to say that is a core precept of Career Forward, of our book, which is having a great career has to be built on the foundation of being good at what you do. And I figured that out pretty early, and I'm grateful I did, because if you're good at what you do, it unlocks a lot of things. You build credibility inside your current workplace. You build supporters who are willing to invest time and mentor you, and you gain confidence in your ability to do hard things. And I think for me, if people looked at my career, one of the things they'd see is, whatever the top was, she always aimed for that. Maybe I didn't always get it, but a lot of times I did. It wasn't easy. It was hard. But if you told me that's where the bar was, then I was pretty sure that to set myself apart, I had to get over that bar. And the second aspect of that is I was willing to take risks to do that. So moving from 24 years in management consulting to a senior operating executive role at Nike Inc. is an example, because a lot of people thought that what I really ought to do when I retire from McKinsey is buy a winery. Go sit on my porch and watch my olive trees grow, or something like that, because you've made a decent living, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, buy that condo on the beach and whatever. And instead I dove right into the deep end of the pool, in a very different environment. And people view that as being exceptionally risky, but I think it was risk that was managed, right? I knew kind of what the upside and the downside could be, and I was comfortable with it.
I was mentioning to my wife, who is on a similar career path where she is, and she was just leading a panel of women in leadership at our conference. And she asked a few questions that I thought would be appropriate to ask you. She said, well, I guess one would be, did you ever fight feelings of self-doubt, feelings of being an outsider, feelings of insecurity, or feelings that you had to prove yourself? And do you still struggle with those? But how did you overcome those while, again, so many other people were competing against you?
So the answer to feeling self-doubt or kind of questioning yourself is yes, of course I did. Every time I got into a new arena, a new environment, a new company, a new skill set, right? Even as recently as writing this book, right? I have no background in authorship. I'm not literary. There's nothing in my history that would say I know how to put a book together, get an agent, get a publisher, et cetera. But Grace Puma and I, my co-author, figured it out. And that's part of what I think you have to do, because we talk in the book about very often the response to feeling out of place or maybe unworthy of being someplace you are or not fitting in is you either have that imposter syndrome sort of reaction or you have that fake it till you make it reaction. Those are two really different things, and we actually want to encourage readers to pull those apart. We're okay with fake it till you make it, because fake it till you make it is a positive mindset that says, I am going to project confidence to those around me, even though I don't feel it yet. It's going to be contagious. Confidence is contagious. I'm going to project it. We would add to that. And by the way, I'm going to bust my butt to learn whatever I need to learn, so I'm not faking it here anymore. Right? So if I've moved up to a new management level, I'm going to talk to my peers. I'm going to look at leaders I admire. I'm going to take leadership classes. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to learn how to lead in this new context. But in the meantime, I'm going to act like I know what I'm doing. That's a very positive kind of mind trick that you can do. Imposter syndrome is unhelpful. Imposter syndrome is telling yourself over and over again, I don't belong here. I don't fit. And after a while, you're going to believe it. Right? And it's a very negative spiral. If you actually feel like it's not just that I'm faking it till I figure it out, but I literally don't belong here, then you don't have the confidence you're actually going to need to do well. So we'd love to kill imposter syndrome and lean into fake it till you make it while working hard to figure it out.
At Andocia, we help transform visions into results. What does that mean? We often work with companies who are doing amazing things that have incredible products and services, but fail to communicate what they do properly and market themselves effectively. We passionately serve entrepreneurs, business leaders, and visionaries to see what's in their heart and their visions for the future come to life. We do that by providing fractional marketing leadership and creative execution all in one. That's what we call VCMO. With VCMO, you get a marketing director and a team of creative professionals to help execute all of your marketing needs, all for one monthly cost. How do we do all this? We do it 3 ways. Number 1, we get your vision. We get excited about your mission and your trajectory as a company and come alongside to see you go further, faster. 2, we have a team of talented strategists and creatives to get all of the work done. And 3, we flat out work freaking hard for you and your company. Reach out today. Let's start a conversation.
So good. I love the tagline of the book, Strategies from Women Who've Made It. And we were just talking, before we hit record, I was just asking if you do any, one-on-one coaching. And you said, well, it's really, really hard with your schedule. And that's part of the reason you wrote the book. And as you and your co-author were processing writing this, what do you all see as some of the biggest challenges facing women in the workplace today?
I think part of the challenge is still always about history, cultural expectations, and whether there are enough women who've gone before you doing what it is you want to do. All right. There's still not that many fields where you're going to get to the level your wife is, SVP, EVP, and you're going to look around the room and it's going to be full of women, right? It's still not the case in many, many sectors, right? And there are also low expectations sometimes that are set for women by their own families, by their teachers, by their mentors, right? I think you have to come out of the gate swinging, right? Which is to have a faith and belief in yourself and to say that I am worth investing in and demonstrate that by performing. I'll come back to that again, right? Be good at what you're doing. Yes. Push yourself to always continue to learn and be better. And you will find that other people are attracted to help you be successful. And that's, I think, what the reality of what women are still going to have to do. And honestly, I say women, but we wrote this book and we're very surprised by our own editor at Scribner, who's a man, who told us he identified with a lot of these situations we talked about from earlier in his career. So basically anyone that's junior, anyone that's new at what they're doing, anyone that feels like an other, right? Could be people of color, could be gender, could be whatever. You're probably going to find a lot of what we say helpful, because it resonates in terms of being the only, being the first, or being different.
Yeah. Any other advice? I'm assuming in the beginning days, McKinsey was probably male dominated. How, as a woman, what advice do you have for women who are in male dominated industries where they do go into rooms and they find themselves being the only woman?
Yeah. Well, a couple of pieces of advice that I give women, particularly when they're the only or one of the few, right? The first is, don't let that get to you. This right, because it's a headspace, right, that you're going to have to make sure you don't fall into, right? Project confidence, believe in yourself, right? Second, if you're in a room for a meeting, whether you are the only woman or there are only a few women there, make sure you speak up, because you've got to remind yourself you're in that room for a reason. Right? You were in that meeting. You were in your job for a reason. You got to step up and you got to contribute. And I learned that at business school, because the grad school that I went to, 50% of your grade was based on class participation. And I came in as a pretty quiet person. I would usually read the room, maybe once in a while, I'd jump into a conversation. That was not going to help me pass a class. If half of my grade was participation, so I set myself a goal that I would speak at least once a day in every single class, every single week. And I got a passing grade every time in my participation, and I didn't have to worry about it, right? I think it's the same thing when you're out at work, right? If you sit in a room and you feel intimidated by a lot of people around you who either seem smarter or look different or have more experience than you, just remind yourself you're in the room for a reason, and don't leave that room unless you've said something meaningful and helpful.
Wow. It's such good advice. One of the chapters in the book is called Own Your Ambition. And I think somewhere in there you talked about practicing boldness, which is what I'm hearing from you. And it sounds like women a lot of times can shy away from owning their ambition. Can you talk more about that and why was that so important that you made it a chapter?
Yeah, we did a lot of research for the book. And one of the things that we found was that earlier in their careers, if you surveyed women and men about what their career ambitions were and how high their aspirations were, they were very similar. In fact, a higher percentage of women were more likely to say that they had the ambition of being in a top job than men did. You roll that forward mid-career and it flips, right? And you survey and what you hear is something very different. And when you ask women in public forums whether they're ambitious, a lot of times they shy away from using that word. We even call it the A word in the book because it's almost like you have to be careful not to actually say it out loud. It has to do with those notions that get attached to the word ambition when it's used for women, right? And it's words like bossy, right?
Yeah.
It's words like aggressive. It's words like grasping, right? It's all the careerist, right? We hear all those sorts of phrases when we talk about women and ambition in the same sentence sometimes. And there are public examples of women who have reached for higher roles, whether, corporate America or politics or whatever, and got smacked pretty hard in the public discussion about being too ambitious. So, okay, that's the reality right now. We still would encourage women to be bold. And what that means is speak up in the right places about what your aspirations are and use the word aspiration if that fits better than ambition for you, right? What that means is in your reviews with your boss, right? In your personal professional development plans that a lot of employers will have you work up, right? Or in the plan that you write for yourself that we think is a core part of being career forward, where you own your own ambition. Get it on paper, because then you can start to express to people in a constructive way what it is you want to do and where you're trying to go. At the very least, own your ambition to yourself and acknowledge it. And I tell a story in the book that was really a light bulb moment for me. I was dating someone, a guy, who came from a similar background and in terms of management consulting. And I remember him telling me, I would never want to be married to a partner of McKinsey Company. And I said, I wanted to keep dating this guy. So I said, I don't want to be a partner. And then I thought about it later on. And I was like, yeah, actually, I do want to be a partner. I want to be a partner,
Nice.
Not just because it's a top job, but because I can steer the firm, because I'm an equity owner, because I can help an awful lot of clients, right, across an awful lot of interesting problem areas. Like, I want to be a partner. But at that moment, I realized I didn't even feel comfortable saying it. So the first thing I had to do to actually put a career path in place that made sense, that was likely to succeed at McKinsey, I had to come to the realization and acknowledge to myself that, yes, I did want to be a partner and I was going to put in the time and the effort to get there.
Wow. I love that ambition. And I'm curious. So it's great to have aspirations to even want to be a partner, et cetera. And correct me if I'm wrong. You have children, correct?
I have a son. Yes. He's 32 now. Yep.
32-year-old son. So wonderful. So you have career ambitions, but then, hey, you get married, you start to have children. Like my wife still feels called to work and like she still has that aspiration. You mentioned you were part-time, I believe, at McKinsey, working 4 days a week. Like what, just speak to this whole area of women who are working, have that high ambition, but also have a family at home that I'm sure is a huge ambition of theirs as well. Yeah.
Big topic. A lot of times you hear it expressed as work-life balance. Like, particularly for women, they struggle to find work-life balance. I know a lot of men, by the way, that also are still trying to find it. In the book, yeah, exactly. Hands raised. In the book, in Career Forward, we actually say, let's ditch the concept of work-life balance. Okay, why? Because first of all, nobody's really found it. And we've been talking about it for decades. So it's a tired concept. Second of all, it starts with the notion of pitting work and life against each other, as if they can never both be mutually achieved, as if every time I do something that works for my career, it's going to hurt my personal life. And every time I do something I need in my personal life, it's going to hurt my career. And that's not what Grace and I learned over time. What we prefer to put out there is a concept we call the 360-degree life. 360 degrees means your whole self. Okay, you have a lot of facets to you that are important. We got to see a lot of other facets of our friends and colleagues during COVID because suddenly we all were on Zoom, right? Suddenly we all could see the dog walk in the background. We could hear the doorbell ring. We could see the kid come up and like try to get on the mom's lap during the meeting. Like, we all saw that stuff and we dealt with it, right? You could not separate work and family if you were working in your house. And there are a lot of people that are still able to do that today. Okay, so first of all, we feel like some of the barriers have finally begun to come down. And people are beginning to understand we're all whole people with a holistic life. Second thing is, we want to say, we believe there are solutions that you can find that actually help you have a more fulfilling career, which helps you have a happier life. And when you have a happier life, you perform better at your job. Like, we're looking for that. That's the 360. Yes. That's the virtuous cycle that we want to recommend people get into. So how do you get into that? Okay, first you have to figure out what's important to you. And at any point in time in your life, if you're thinking of your life as like that 360-degree wheel, different parts of your life are going to spin up to the top at different times and need more time and attention, right? It's going to change as you get older. It changes when you have kids. It changes when you have a partner. It changes when your parents age. It changes if you have a health issue. Those are all, very common things that are going to cause your dial to optimize different things at different times. We want to encourage people to create options for themselves in their career that allow them to make things work across the whole 360 degrees. And my example is the working part-time at McKinsey. So you go back to what I said about being good at what you do and how that earns you credibility. We call it professional equity, right? With your employer, with your teams, with your boss. Because I had been at McKinsey for 5 years before I had my son, when I found it impossible to keep working the hours I was working and be the mom I wanted to be, I went in to quit. I went into the office manager's office and I said, I can't do this, and so I'm going to quit. And he said something that basically frames up the whole 360-degree mindset. He said, you can't leave until you tell me what it would take to make you stay. And what that did was put the burden back on me to come up with some options. Now, they could always say no, but it meant I had to problem solve because I knew my needs better than anybody else. That rather than wait for the firm to meet me and say, hey, here's a solution that we think will work, he was saying, you've got to be in the driver's seat. You've got to tell us what you need. We'll tell you if we can make that work. And so I went off and thought about it, and I came back and said, I need to have more time at home. I need to have less time traveling. I need to have a more regular schedule, blah, blah, blah. And so what I'd like to do is lock in on a Monday to Thursday, da, 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 da. And I put together this whole thing. Fully expected they would throw it right back in my face. Instead, they said, okay. And they said, okay, because they didn't want to lose me. And they didn't want to lose me because I was good, right? So that's what I'm talking about in terms of the virtuous cycle, right? I had invested 5 years of my life in the firm. They had invested 5 years of development and training and compensation in me, right? So you start with that confidence, you build on it by performing, and you recognize that the ball's in your court to develop some options. And then maybe they'll meet you partway, maybe they won't. But at the very least, you push yourself to be bold, to have confidence, and to recognize that there really is a path forward that solves multiple problems or opportunities in your life at the same time.
Yeah, that's so good. And I just want to reemphasize that, the whole performance thing. I always share, I heard a story about there was a sign on a grocery store that said the 57 rules of success. And it said, number 1, deliver the goods. And then number 2 said the other 56 don't matter. And I tell that all the time to leaders. If you will just produce, to what you're saying, you can earn the flexibility and freedom that you want, because everyone wants people who are good. So just thank you for reemphasizing that.
Well, and I think, Doug, it's really relevant now because of, the way we're all revisiting looking at work and life post-pandemic. And there's been these different kind of concepts that have risen to the top on, TikTok and Instagram and, LinkedIn, like quiet quitting. Like, well, the Great Resignation first happened. Then there was quiet quitting. Then there's lazy girl jobs. Now there's act your wage, which is basically work just enough to do the requirements of your current job and nothing more. All of those things might work for a moment, but they're very short-term oriented, right? Yes. And our career forward mindset is about taking the long view of your career and saying that my career is more than just my job. My career is going to be building a set of experiences and a track record that gets me someplace I want to go, right? And the problem with any of these shorter term sort of approaches is when conditions change in the world, in your life, in the business environment, in the economy, that approach isn't going to work. And you're going to find yourself completely unprepared, right? Which means you could be the one that gets laid off. You could be in the company that gets bought, or you could be in the division that gets shut down, right? These are the things that catch you by surprise. And we want you to have a long-term plan so that you are not caught by surprise.
I love thinking long-term. I'm curious your opinion on this. So you were at McKinsey for 24 years. You mentioned that you basically got to a point where you were ready for a change. I think loyalty, and again, I know that's a word that could be abused too, but I think loyalty is also something that's missing in today's world. People just want to stay in a place for a year or two, like you said. And again, that's maybe great short-term, but long-term. Can you just speak to the importance of staying somewhere even when it's tough? And when do you know you're ready to, like, you knew you're ready to go? Like, when is it okay to look for other things? Because I think a lot of people do want to stay loyal to the companies they work at.
Well, Grace, Puma, and I are big fans of being loyal to your employer and loyal to yourself, and recognizing that being loyal to both means sometimes you're going to have to make a decision, right? We call those forks in the road. And every career, if you've got a long-term view of your career, you are going to come to a fork in the road. And a fork in the road is typically a should I stay or should I go moment, right? And we want to give you some tools to be prepared for that and then to respond in the moment when it comes up. Because there are forks in the road that you can see coming, which are you're maturing in your role, you're not seeing anybody ahead of you get promoted, you're starting to feel like you're stagnating. You begin to think about whether it's time. That's a fork in the road that we would, if you take a long-term view, we would say you can see that coming. Then there's the forks in the road that just happen, right? Your company gets sold, right? There's a layoff, and unfortunately, you're one of the ones, right? Those things present you with a choice too, where it's not so much should I stay or go, it's how do I respond? What do I do in this moment when I feel like I'm going to freeze, right? And what we think is super important is that you always stop and take a breath and think. And you're going to see in Career Forward, we're always a big fan of taking a fact-based approach to career decisions. And what that means is get as much information as you can about the situation. So if you're at a fork in the road where you've been in a company for a while, you're performing well, you're getting good feedback, but you're not getting traction. You're not actually seeing yourself get invited to the meetings you want to go to. You're not seeing yourself being asked to lead projects, special projects that you think you could do a good job on. You're seeing some of your peers get promoted, and maybe that's not you, right? It's time for you to figure out what's going on, right? And what that means is you get all the feedback that you can from your peers, from your teams, from your bosses, from your mentors. And you take that feedback and you take what you're thinking about as your long-term career, which we call it your career GPS, right? We're going to encourage you to think every year about what you're trying to do, where you want to go next. Put those two together and create a set of options for yourself. I could tell my boss that I want to get a managerial position in the next 12 to 18 months and explain why and see how that conversation goes. I could begin to put feelers out in the recruiting community. I could, put options together and then decide which options you're going to pursue. That's what we think you need to do at a fork in the road, because then you're doing it, you're keeping your own power. You are on your front foot. You're still taking a long-term view of your career, but you're recognizing that with the facts you have at hand, there's probably only a set of particular options that make sense for you to do next. And then you choose the option, and sometimes the environment will influence the option, but you've put that set of options together.
You mentioned the importance of getting feedback, which I love, from your peers, from your bosses. I'm just curious, in your career, I'm sure you had a lot of bosses that probably had a lot of candor. Were there one or two pieces of advice that you got throughout your career or feedback that changed everything for you or really helped elevate you to that next level?
Yes, I can give you a litany, Doug. So this is why feedback is so helpful. It's so helpful, and it's sticky. Feedback is sticky. Yes. If you actually listen with an open mind to what people are trying to tell you, it will stick in your mind. And then the ball is in your court. I keep saying this, right? The burden is on you to respond to it and to put action plans together to address it. So some of the earliest feedback I got when I was still an individual contributor, this was when I was an associate in investment banking, was I had made a mistake on something. an avoidable mistake on a model. I was going fast. I did something. I turned it into my boss. He found the mistake, and I tried to blame it on this more junior person that was on my team, that she didn't catch it. And he said, Christiana, just say you screwed up and move on. But if you don't say you screwed up, I'm just going to be sitting here the whole time thinking less of you because you wouldn't tell me that you screwed up.
Wow.
And so,
Wow.
and that has stuck with me forever. When you screw up, say you did. Don't beat around the bush. Say you did. Make a legit attempt to fix it. Do whatever is in your power to fix it. And people will move past it with you, right? Works in your personal life, works in your professional life. That's one. Another one, later in my career, my first role managing others. I had 2 associates on my team, and I was still not confident in my ability to pull back from their work because I wasn't the one doing it anymore, but still vouch for it. So I looked over their shoulder all the time, right? And nitpicked everything they did and whatever. And it was 2 guys, and they both sat me down at one point, and I'm grateful they had the nerve to do it. And they said, Christiana, this is not helpful to us. Like, first of all, you should tell us what we're doing right versus spending all your time telling us the things we got to fix. And second of all, you need to be thinking out ahead of us, right? Yes, you can check our work regularly, but what we really need you to do is be thinking about what we should be doing next. And you're spending an awful lot of time like double counting what we're doing, and then we don't actually have a good plan for what we're supposed to do next. So that was the second piece of advice that really, really stuck with me. And the third one I'll mention is a boss who said to me, Christiana, never underestimate the value of being someone people want to spend time with. And what he was talking about was EQ. And basically the value of being someone that people find energizing, being someone that people feel uplifted after talking to versus beat down, being someone that you look forward to taking the call from, you look forward to having coffee with, you look forward to working with. And that has stuck with me for the rest of my life too.
I'm curious, just anything that you pivoted or changed in the way that you interacted with people after hearing that made you more.
Yeah. My personality is very much cut to the point, say what needs to be said, say it as quickly as you can, move on to the next thing, right? High clock speed, fast thinker, very much about results orientation. And when I got the feedback about being someone people want to spend time with, and also the feedback of noting what's going well before you focus on what needs to get fixed, that materially changed my behavior. It is still a learned behavior for me. I actually still will consciously tell myself when I am in a feedback session on a piece of work. And, as a senior leader, you got teams presenting proposals and work and everything constantly, right? Looking for decisions. It is still a very conscious behavior on my part that I acknowledge, first of all, the hard work that went into whatever they're showing me, and legit, right? This has to be authentic, legit. You can't just give them face value. But first of all, acknowledge the effort that went in no matter what. And second of all, appreciate and find the things that are good about the work that they're showing you. And then, and it's not a compliment sandwich. It's not, I like this, I don't like that, I like that. It's, I acknowledge, first of all, that you guys have really, really worked hard on this thing. And I'm glad you did because it's important, right? And second of all, I agree with you, blah, 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 with the things that you've put in here and you've noted. Here's where I want to spend more time. And I get to the part that I'm not so sure about. And, my teams would always know. We used to call it Find Waldo. That kids book where Waldo is this guy in this red and white sweater and hat. And you have to look at this incredibly complex picture and you have to find Waldo. My teams used to always joke that I would always find the Waldo, like the one thing that, but whereas I used to go in and just poke them on Waldo right away, what I do now is step back and say, hey, holistically, I want to leave them in a better place than they were before. So we're going to acknowledge this part that has to get improved, but I also want them to keep doing the stuff they're doing that I like. So I'm going to make sure that they understand my support for them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. One, I just think it overstresses the importance of getting feedback so we can see how we're being received. But two, I think so many times leaders will just put themselves in a box and say, well, I'm just not good with people, or hey, I'm just direct and that's the way I am. And they're never open to actually changing and growing. And as a result, they cap their growth. And so kudos to
Yeah.
you for
Well,
doing
it's
the
a
hard
good,
work.
Doug, you just said the line that makes me crazy is the one like, this is how I am, so I can't be different. And I'm like, really? Are you
Yeah.
exactly the same now as you were when you were 6, when you were 12, when you were 24? No. I mean, of course you're not. And honestly, we're not asking you to change who you are. You got to be authentic. As a leader, teams can tell right away if you're not coming from a place of authenticity, right? What you've got to think about changing is your behaviors. And we absolutely
Yes.
control our behavior.
Yeah, I am curious. So you've always been a top performer. You're now on boards. You've been in publicly traded companies. There's a ton of pressure that comes with all of those things. And then as a mom, you also have the pressure at home to be a great mom and all these different demands on your life. How throughout your career have you handled both the pressure of leadership and even the pain that can come with leadership, just with situations that come up, and not break mentally?
Yeah, I would say that taking care of yourself as a leader, both emotionally, psychologically, physically, is really important, particularly the more senior your job or the more difficult the times that you're working in. And, we talk in the book about the importance of self-care and about the importance of getting a support network that you can rely on, right? And so you're right about leaders facing hard times, separating someone, right? Firing someone.
Yep.
There's a rare instance where you're firing someone who was just terrible. Maybe it was for cause, right? A lot of the time, it's just this isn't the right best place for that person, and that person isn't the right best one for the job, right? And you're not ever going to feel that good, nor should you, about those conversations. So you gotta be a human being about all of that. And I will definitely say there were times when I brought a lot of work stress home. But physical activity really helps me a lot. I know a lot of people who either run or they like to do CrossFit or they do whatever they do because that does get you out of your head for a while. Meditation is another really good one. It sounds woo-woo to some people, but, I'm watching some friends of mine who are very senior people, and they are committed in the morning to taking that 20 minutes first thing and meditating. And they are some of the most balanced human beings that I know. So you're going to have to figure out what it is. But we also note that sometimes a lot of that stress is self-imposed because you think you have to do it all, especially for women. You think you have to do it all. And so what we want to encourage people to think about is, what does your personal support system look like? And how over time do you put that in place? And, one of the things I heard when I was a new partner, and therefore my comp took a nice step up, was, hey, you're starting to get to the point where you can afford to pay people to do things you don't want to do. I couldn't pay people to do everything I didn't want to do, but I could pay them to do some things, So, for instance, cleaning my own house. Like, I grew up cleaning my own house. My mom had the 5 of us deployed every week to clean zones of the house. Like, I know how to clean a house. And I also am a clean freak. Like, I really actually want to know that it's clean. I realized that there was no way that I could keep doing the things I was doing as I got more senior and have a clean house. So it was either like come home every night stressed because the environment around me feels cluttered and not kind of zen the way that I want to have, or suck it up and pay somebody, to clean my house and be deeply appreciative that they're willing to do it, and for a lot of women, they're going to feel for a while, particularly with childcare, because it is so expensive. They're going to feel like they're working just to pay for the childcare. And I just heard this again from a family member. They just had their first baby. He's 2 months old, starting to get to, does mom go back to work? Does she not? And they're living in a very high cost part of the West Coast. And, pretty much I'd be working just for the childcare. And I say, you're also working for you. Again, take that long-term view. Don't just think about the job, think about the career. And in 2 or 3 years, the baby's going to be in preschool part of the day. You're going to be earning 2 or 3 years more compounded increases on top of what you'd be making today. And guess what? The lines start to cross the other way.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the first couple of years that you go back to work, when you're earlier in your career, which a lot of us are when we have kids, the math of childcare may not feel quite right. But if you can afford it, invest in yourself and think of those couple of years as an investment in yourself, your family, and your career. Because within a couple of years, faster than you think, right? 3 years, the lines flip. But if they don't, one of the things that we did the research on and we have the data on is if you step out of the workforce for some period of time and your income falls back, you never catch up. You never catch up.
Wow.
And for a lot of women, by retirement age, they are missing about $500,000 in aggregated comp. And think about if you invested $500,000 over the course of your career and now you're getting ready to retire, you have a very different retirement than if you had not kept working, right? So we really want, again, back to that long-term, take the long-term view. Don't just think about what happens in these next 12 months. Think out a couple of years, think out 3 years. You don't have to go further than that, and recognize that you could get yourself to a very different place.
Yeah, such good advice. I don't think I shared this with you. So we have 4 kids under 7, which is insanity right now. And this year we actually just finished our peak cost for daycare, which is our tax guy looked at our daycare bill and he said he threw up when he saw what we paid. But to your point, it's interesting too. Now, again, my wife's a top performer, but every kid that we had, we weren't sure of, similar conversations like, hey, can we do this? What should we do? And and I don't know if it's coincidence, we're people of faith, so we believe it was God, but like every child, she had gotten an increase that literally covered what we needed to cover the next kid. And it was just amazing. And now that we're starting to see the other side, it's like, oh my goodness. And we're just so grateful that she kept pressing through, and me too.
And so first of all, I celebrate and congratulate you guys for doing that, because imagine now 4 more years from now, where things are going to be. And it's not just about financials. It's about how you and your wife feel about what you're doing every day, right? It's about what your kids are seeing their mom do, right? These are other benefits that come in addition to, balancing the checkbook. And we say this recognizing that for some women at the moment they have kids, they aren't actually making enough for dedicated childcare or for daycare. And what we're seeing women do, and we encourage, is so they're putting a support network together that might include a nanny share, right? Yeah. They're putting a support network together, which includes working part-time for a while, or working from home. Or, one instance I know, they are, their baby's in daycare 4 days a week, but home on Fridays, because Friday is work from home day, and it's a very light meeting day. And both parents feel like they can actually deal with the baby and still get done the Friday version of work. Everybody's figuring it out, and we just encourage people to do that, because this is back to that 360-degree life, because you don't have to always make a trade-off, right? You can find something that works across the whole 360.
Well, with the time that we have left, I do want to jump into the lightning round, but we'll include a link in the show notes to the book, and encourage everyone listening to this, men and women, to buy it. It sounds phenomenal, and it's just going to add so much value. So thank you again. Lightning round, again, a bunch of fun questions I ask in every interview. And the first one is, what is the best advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
Okay, the best advice I ever received, I already shared with you, which is not underestimating the value of being someone people want to spend time with. That has helped me also have a lot of friends in my life, and I am the kind of person that's a lot happier when I have people around me that like me and who I like. So that's brought me a lot of joy.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Oh, figure it out. That's our family motto. That's our family motto. Figure it out.
I love it.
I watched a home improvement show where they made a dining table and carved the family's motto into the table. And I talked to my adult son, and we were both like, yeah, ours would be figure it out. It's always been that idea of you are in control, right? Empower yourself to figure things out and get what you need, right? Help others get what they need, but don't wait for someone else to figure it out for you.
So good.
And by the way,
Other
my
than
son
your,
would tell, it's so annoying. My son will tell you, and his cousins, he has a lot of cousins who've spent a lot of time with me. I literally told them that as they were growing up, Mom, how do I do this? Mom, how do I do that? Figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, I'm going to help you out, but try, right? So, yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of people would be surprised at how much they can figure out if they just tried.
And how
So
good
good.
how good does a kid feel when they actually
Oh,
solve the math problem themselves, right? When they got that Lego
yeah.
built themselves. Yeah. So
I'm going to have to talk to my wife about, we have a list of core values in our family, but we may add that one. She's
figure
going to
it
love
out.
that.
I know.
Figure it out. Other than your own, what's one or two books that have greatly impacted you that you either give away most often or talk about?
Okay. One I give away is called Checklist Manifesto. It's by a surgeon named Atul Gawande, who is a true Renaissance man. He's a surgeon and he's an author and a great thinker. And he wrote this book called Checklist Manifesto, which talks about how the surgical checklist was developed, which has basically revolutionized surgery so that they don't operate on the wrong leg, so that they don't take out the wrong kidney, so they don't do the wrong surgery on you or whatever. And the point of the book is how simple tools can transform complex jobs. And that, and literally how you can boil down surgical prep as an example, but he talks about pilots and the checklist pilots use before they take off. He talks about checklists before you hit the button to launch a bomb. He goes across all these different professions and careers where simple checklists have saved the day, right? And like as an example, that plane that had the bird fly into the jets over New Jersey or New York, you remember that one? And it landed on the East River and right? Those pilots had been trained so rigorously in that flight checklist that you go through when there's an accident, when something like that happens. You can hear them on the audio go through it, and it keeps them calm, and it gave them the presence of mind to land that plane on the water. I give that to teams because we all are doing really complicated things. And yet, if you pull back and say, what are simple things that I can do to improve those outcomes? There's usually something. So I would say Checklist Manifesto. And then personally, I've been really inspired by some of the books by the former President Jimmy Carter. And his books are not the political, set your politics aside. These are books about how he created a life of service and of service to others. And if you know the Carters and the Carter Foundation, honestly, he did more after being president than during. But they've helped eradicate guinea worm disease. They've helped address poverty around the world. They helped launch Habitat for Humanity, which is a major part of my philanthropy now. And it's important to me at this stage of my life because I know that what goes around comes back around, and it's my time to, put things out there. So reading about people who literally have lived an entire life of serving others is very inspirational to me at this moment.
Wow. I love that answer. When you get to spend time with someone that you admire, you've worked for some of the world's greatest leaders. You are one. Do you have a go-to question that you always ask?
Oh, gosh. I like to ask people what makes them laugh.
So what makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? I have a really dry sense of humor, and it's kind of wicked, So like, I'm very judgy of my, of my family, and particularly like what makes me laugh is that those kinds of situations. Like my family can just make me roll on the floor. It's kind of an Irish Catholic family. Everybody's got a super dry sense of humor, and we laugh a lot. And I honestly, I connect better with people who have a sense of humor. I think it's important to bring humor to work. It's important to bring humor to life because otherwise life can be so hard, and it's so serious.
Yes.
So I really like the idea of injecting a little humor into life. And actually a good friend of mine who's a professor at Stanford Business School wrote a whole book about it. She calls it Humor Seriously, by Jennifer Acker.
Wow.
And it's about actually humor in the workplace. And she studied stand-up comics and took lessons and like literally did stand-up comedy and teaches a whole class now in business school about bringing humor in to manage tough situations, to build camaraderie, to generate creative solutions to problems. Like, turns out there's a lot of value to humor.
Wow. I've asked that question over 400 times and no one's ever asked that. So I love that. On the opposite end of humor, what's your greatest leadership pet peeve?
My leadership pet peeve. Oh, people who are bullies. Leaders who
Yes.
intimidate others is how I would describe it. Because I was just talking about this yesterday. I realized that unintentionally, as you become more senior, you intimidate people by virtue of your rank, right? So
Wow. Yeah.
when I made partner, when I was vice president, when I was president, like every time you walk in the room with that title and that responsibility, people know it already, right? And they're already somewhat like nervous. And so I would go out of my way not to be intimidating because I remember being more junior and not appreciating that, and you don't need to speak harshly to somebody. You don't need to cut them off. That's a big bullying behavior, is interrupting, right? And not letting people finish their sentence. I used to do that unintentionally just because I was like moving on to the next topic. And I realized that to a lot of people, that was actually an intimidating behavior because you were
Wow.
overriding their voice, right? So that's my biggest pet peeve, is when I see leaders who I think are just kind of knuckleheads, kind of buttheads, and they don't really need to be. And I just want to tell them to like lighten up, listen more, talk less. Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't consider myself a bully. And I think I'm pretty self-aware around that. But when you said the interrupting thing, and again, I don't do it to intimidate people. It's just my mind. Like when you were like, hey, I'm thinking, okay, that may come off as intimidating when I interrupt people. And I don't do it, like you said, I don't do it intentionally, but thank you. That just is challenging me in my leadership of just fully listening, being fully present, and letting people finish. Thank you.
I'm still working on it, Doug. So.
Okay. Well, it's good today. I'll probably be working on it for the rest of my life. Two more questions and then I'll just leave it open-ended. But if you could go back and have coffee with yourself at any age and you would have actually listened to yourself, what age would you meet with yourself and what would you tell that version of you?
I would meet with myself in my late 20s and I would tell myself it's okay to say no.
Wow.
It's okay to say no sometimes. Because I felt like I had to do it all. I felt like I had to say yes to everything that was asked of me. And I didn't want to be the naysayer. I didn't want to be the can't do it person. I wanted to be the can do it person. What I tell people now is find a way to say yes to what you can do. And implicitly, you are saying no to the things you can't or won't or don't want to do, right? And it changes the conversation. So if someone says, I need you to stay late tonight, Christiana, we got to finish this up by tomorrow. I need it at my desk at 8 a.m. You can say, no, I can't stay late tonight. Or you can say, I can take this home, or I can stay an extra 90 minutes and I will get this as far as I can. Those are all things that are saying this is what I can do. And by definition, if I didn't say I can do it, I can't. But it's that figuring it out kind of mindset, which is I'm going to give you options. You just asked me to do something. That exact way you're asking me isn't going to work for me. I wish I would have known then. I did figure it out, that what I could do instead is say, here's what I can do. And you typically will find plenty of mutual ground if you do it that way.
My number one area of growth this year is to learn how to say no more often. And so that was a gold gem right there. Thank you. And then last question. I don't know if you have an actual bucket list or not, but what's something you've done in your life that you think everyone should experience before they die?
Learn a new language, learn a new instrument later in life. I'm big on brain health. I'm getting older. I definitely want to be alert and enjoying life as long as I can. So I put on my retirement bucket list that I wanted to learn to play the piano, because my entire adult life, I have admired people that could just sit down at a piano and play. And I started taking piano lessons during the pandemic because things had finally slowed down enough that I could do it. And there was a piano teacher that was doing them virtually over Zoom. And I learned to play the piano, and I'm still working on it because it's a lifetime thing. And I'm working on learning Italian because I'm going on a trip to Italy and I want to at least know enough to get myself around and order off a menu. And that kind of thing. So, that's to me, that's bucket list stuff, right? Which is see something new, learn something new, do something new.
Yeah. And it's so funny. Literally my wife, like her number one thing that she wants to learn, but doesn't have time for, she wants to learn how to play the piano. So it's just funny.
Tell her she can do it. You can do Zoom piano lessons now, and you set your iPhone up on a stand and it shows your keyboard and the teacher's on. It's awesome. I never would have made it if I had to show up in person or be home at a certain time to meet a teacher. My life is too busy. But yeah, I'm learning how to play. I'm so not good at it, and I love it so much.
That's so fun. Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for this conversation. We covered a lot. Is there anything else as we close that you would want to leave leaders with
Sure.
today?
I would want to suggest that if people, first of all, want to get the book, it is available on Amazon.com, but honestly, any place books are sold. The audio book is out, the ebook is out. You can get your hands on it anywhere you want. Secondly, if you want to learn more about my co-author Grace and myself, where we're speaking, what we're doing, you can go to our website, which is careerforwardbook.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. Thank you for everything you're doing for women in leadership and leaders worldwide. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the conversation, Doug.
Well, hey, leader, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Christiana. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you'd like to connect with her, you can find all of that information and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes. I also want to thank our sponsor, Andocia Marketing Solutions. They are the producers of the podcast, and if you are looking for help with your organization's marketing, I cannot recommend them enough. They're incredible. Check them out at Andocia.com. That's ANDOCIA.com. And as always, leader, I like to end every episode with a quote, and I'll quote Stephen Covey, who said this. He said, "What you do has far greater impact than what you say." So good. That's going to wrap up today's podcast. As always, leader, remember, don't quit. Keep leading. The world desperately needs your leadership. We'll talk to you next episode.